It's a smart, dumb move. And yet, so many of our people get it. That means, though, that there was enough intelligence there to see on which side the bread was buttered. But here then, within a single generation, the IQ raised 7 points. And the average IQ for the country's younger generation was the highest in the world. Moreover, according to Lynn's figures, about 10% of Japan's population has an IQ level of more than 130, while only 2% of Americans and Western Europeans achieve that score. Lynn calculated that a full 77% of the Japanese have IQs above Western European and U.S. averages. Now, let me just hook into some of it. Does that say that they were naturally smarter? Let's look at this. By correlating Japanese and American results, Lynn determined that the average Japanese score was 111 compared with the U.S. score of 100. His study did not ignore Japanese adults. Even among those born as early as 1910 and through the groups born in the 1930s and 40s, Japanese consistently scored a few points higher than Americans. But the great mental leap forward, but this was not always the case now, and get this sentence, a lead of 11 points over the Americans did not come until the generation born after World War II. In other words, the Japanese IQ did not surpass the American IQ until after World War II. You say, why did this occur? In other words, the myth that the IQ is fixed is just that, a myth. And as they explored the Japanese schools and explored the Japanese experience, they looked directly at it. Not only did they recognize that the Japanese youngsters stay in school 240 days compared to 180 days in the American schools. And actually, when you count up the amount of time American teachers have to struggle to quiet an American classroom and bring children to order, that difference in class time is probably 360 days to 180 days, you see. So there's no great mystery as to why they are performing the way they do. One quick thing, and I'm through here in a second. In Sendai classroom, we're talking about the Japanese classroom, mathematics consume 25% of first grade classroom time. What do we talk about in education? Time on task. In other words, there is a correlation between the amount of time people put in on a subject and the achievement in that subject. And before you run off into any mysterious genetic explanation as to what is happening to our children in these schools, look first at the amount of time they actually spend studying. And you might find that a good deal of the answer is just right there. In Taipei, that's in Taiwan, 17% of the time is spent studying mathematics. In Minneapolis, 14%. In the fifth grade, the average classroom's time spent on the subject was 23% in Japan, 28% in Taiwan, and 17% in Minneapolis. Homework counts too. In Japan, first graders spend an average of 4 hours every week at homework. In Taiwan, they spend 8 hours a week. In the US, they spend 1 hour and 20 minutes. So is there a difference? Is there any mystery to it? By the fifth grade, the average homework minutes were 6 hours for the Japanese, something like 13 for the Taiwanese, and 4 for the Americans. The author concludes, all this suggests to Stevenson that it is indeed the environment rather than heredity that enables the Japanese to perform so well in testing. That Americans, if they are beginning to feel inadequate, should be concerned not about their mental endowment, but about their educational system. Look at us African people with a magnificent genetic inheritance. Look at what the possibilities are for us. If we came to know who we are, if we embrace our African identity, and if we came to love our African self, if we came to have confidence in ourselves, and if we as a people decide to take responsibility for ourselves, we have been given the most talented children on this earth. We've been given the best brains on this earth. It only now matters that we use them. Thank you very much.
To conclude his powerful lecture, The Failure of the Education System, Dr. Amos N. Wilson examines the structural inadequacies of American education, particularly as they impact black children. He argues that black and white children alike are being systematically undereducated when measured against global standards. He teaches us that children in Asian countries spend significantly more time in school and on homework than their American counterparts, which correlates with their educational achievements. Importantly, he notes that the IQ of Asians did not surpass that of Americans until after World War II, illustrating how socioeconomic and educational investments, not innate ability, drive intellectual development. For Wilson, this signals that the educational disparities black children face are not natural, but intentional and rectifiable. Dr. Wilson contextualizes this educational failure with a broader economic and geopolitical framework. He points out that the U.S. population is steadily growing, placing increased strain on the nation's finite resources. This intensifies competition among racial and ethnic groups. For Black Americans, this competition is existential. They must learn to produce and control their own economic resources or face societal irrelevance. Wilson is clear that Black people are in a zero-sum competition for survival, not just with the dominant white society, but with other racial groups who are already mobilizing educationally and economically to secure their future.
I don't know what to say after that, but if you could just hold on a couple of minutes, one of the things we like to do is have a brief question and answer period. Some of you might have questions relating to some of the things that Dr. Amos Wilson talked about that you can have a little dialogue on. So we're going to take about 5 minutes. You can stretch your leg, go to the bathroom. We have some books outside. There's some tapes also of this lecture that will be available for sale upon completion. And I think there's some drinks or something like that outside. So if you can take about 5 minutes, we can come back and get some of your questions answered. Thank you.
You suggest.
Okay. Of course, to ensure that the race prospers would mean that the individual would have to join the collective in some way and join in collective action, because the race cannot prosper with individuals acting as individuals, but with individuals acting as groups. And that means then we should join groups and be part of groups that are about achieving particular and specific things that advance the interests of our race. It means then that we should examine our own capabilities, interests, talents, and inclinations, and look around for a group or create a group that has a mission that's very important to our advancement as people. We should learn how to even operate in groups and to operate as parts of groups, because power, by definition, essentially is a group function, not an individual function. And power is not possessed by individuals, it's possessed by individuals who belong to powerful groups. And powerful groups gain their power from the nature of their organization and by the strategies and tactics they use in reference to other groups and in reference to the problems that they're solving, you see. So when you look, say, in the 1960s during the Civil Rights era, look at the tremendous power that was generated by Black folk walking together, you see, or Black folk sitting at a lunch counter together, or Black folk deciding just to line themselves up in a particular way, or Black folk deciding not to do something together, not to ride the bus together, not to shop, you see. And it is when we then become part of group actions that we then multiply our individual power, and then we advance our race and nation as a group and as a people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This question is, of course, for you, but I would like you to direct the answer directly to the young people that are gathered here today. and it has to do with the surplus population that you mentioned. All right. By the middle of the next century, the world population will double. There's an increased mechanization of labor. There's also going to be a shortage of water. All right? This will inevitably bring about, also to add to that, there's also a shrinking in the world's grain production is not keeping up. So when you have such a large group of people, I'm talking about African people globally, that are going to be basically, who cannot defend themselves, nor find a place within the economic niche in the world. Basically, I think that these children are going to have to be taught that they're going to have to struggle for their position in the world.
Yes.
That there's going to be increased conflict, not less.
Right. Okay. Thanks for bringing that up. It's a very, very important question and a very, very important issue. Because, of course, when I was talking about the crisis in white supremacy and the economic crisis, I wanted to get across the point that crisis also represents opportunity. We should not look at then those things that I listed and assume then that means we should give up. As I think Richard Nixon, someone says, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And in a sense, when I read the kinds of things that I read and I talk about the kind of things that I'm talking about, I'm talking to the tough. And so if you're truly tough, then this should be an invigorating message. It's not a message to depress you, but to really motivate you to say, hey, if the world's resources are getting smaller or are shrinking, if there's increasing scarcity, then it is time for me, and I'm speaking in terms of our people, to see to it that we get an appropriate share of those resources. To a great extent, when we talk about racism and we talk about the status quo, to a great extent, the status quo is built on the idea that resources are not limited less. And therefore, some group tries to organize not only itself, but other groups so that it can get its share or more than its share of the limited resources. And as we look then and see these resources becoming more and more scarce, our job opportunities become more and more scarce, we have to become very tough-minded and decide that we are not going to be the people with on the short end of the stick. It's very important for you to notice, to learn to read business statistics and to learn to read employment statistics. Why, for instance, do you get the statement that the economic system grew at a rate of 1.6? You hear that often. Or the economy grew at 1.8. Well, what does that really mean? What it really means is that if you have a growing population, the economy has to grow as fast or faster in order for the new people coming into the job markets to have jobs available to them. An economy that is not growing or that is going too slow, that it is not creating new jobs or not creating enough new jobs, it means at some point the population and the number of people who may even be qualified for jobs will outnumber the number of jobs available. And as I told you earlier, this creates severe problems. This means that often a nation which may at one point had peaceful relationships between ethnic groups and may at one point had law and order, may because now each group is struggling to be the one to get the lion's share of the jobs because there are not enough jobs going around. That means that nation then may start becoming disorganized. That means crime increases, racism may increase, just general social order can change. So this is the reason why you have to recognize that this dream that black folk and white folk are going to live together one day, and that, all of us are going to, black and Chinese and Japanese, everybody's just going to have a wonderful time. That is based on an assumption. It is based on the assumption that the U.S. economy will continue to grow at such a rate that it will have enough jobs and opportunity available for all people. If it grew at that rate, then you could possibly have that dream come true. But if it does not grow at that rate, that means that you got a lot of people competing for scarce resources. We are now at that stage in this country. We're not only at that stage in this country, we're reaching that stage in the world. The economy in Africa, for instance, on the whole, is only growing at about 1.2%. And yet its population is growing between 3 and 4%. That means the number of people that are being born, the number of people who say theoretically may be trained for new jobs, is 3 times the number of jobs available. That is a scenario for economic disaster. When you compare that to the amount of water available, and when you compare that to the amount of food that is available, which is of course related to water and other things, you can begin to see that Africa will be beset with tremendous political and economic problems as its population outstrips its resources and its growth. The United States, if Clinton does not create new jobs, does not to some degree reindustrialize this country, will also be facing a similar situation. And there's only a couple of solutions to this problem. And that is either you get used to living in chaos and a tremendous amount of ethnic conflicts and fights, or some ethnic group is going to have to pay the price and disappear. Or some ethnic group is going to have to increase its productivity and growth such that it can feed its population. And that means that the African nations are going to have to speed up their economic development and their growth, learn new scientific methods and do other things in order to feed their population and to increase the quality of life. But, ladies and gentlemen, the same thing is true about Africans in America. The African American population today must see itself now as a nation. And instead now of merely trying to educate children for jobs that do not exist, the African American nation in America must come to create jobs. It must now make jobs. The children now must be trained not for jobs, but be trained to become employers and job creators. The children now must be trained to take the economic infrastructure, which is in the hands of other groups, away from those other groups, so that they can gain the wealth that's in those businesses. Not only then must the African American community take over its economic infrastructure, and yes, I mean move Koreans out. Yes, I'm very upfront about that. And I mean move any other ethnic group out. It's not exclusive to Koreans. You either got a choice. You're going to give your money away and let other people cart it out and feed their children while your own starve and go into crime and criminality and suffer, or you're going to use your own money to feed your own children. This is not a statement of hatred against Koreans or a statement of hatred against the other people. It's not a statement of hatred. It's a statement of love. It says you love your children enough to see that you spend your money in a way that they can be the primary beneficiaries of it. You understand? It has nothing against the other people. It's for yourself. You don't owe other people a living. You do not owe the Koreans a living. There's nothing that says you owe them a living. As I've said before, I've seen black men die on the soil of Korea. I've seen black tax money go to fight wars in Korea. I've seen black tax money go and build highways and build the Korean industrial infrastructure. I've seen black money in the armies and the navies that protected South Korea from North Korea, protected South Korea from China. So why do we feel that we owe the Koreans a living when they come to America? I've seen black tax money come back in the form of Korean investment wealth and invest in the black community. And I've seen the Koreans look upon us the way white folk look upon us, and some Negroes feel obligated to support them. You don't owe the people a living. You must know what's going on. So finally then, you must take over the economic infrastructure of your own communities, but you can't stop there because there's not enough wealth there to feed all of our people. We then must invade the general economic system itself. So the children must be educated to now take economic power from the general system. And not only then must you take that power from the general system, but you now must engage in international trade, export-import trade, to create jobs for your people and ultimately build a Pan-African economic system. Because the people that survive today are the races that have economic centers of their people across the world. See, the European not only spread African people across the world, which weakened African people, but the Europeans spread themselves across the world. But in spreading themselves across the world, they built economic networks, banking relations, commercial relations, and other kinds of relations based on their Europeanness. This is what allowed them to develop a global economic system. Now today, instead of us seeing our being spread across the world as a problem and as a weakness, it can become the source of our strength. It means then that we can build economic relations between blacks in New York City and Los Angeles and all in between blacks in America and in the Caribbean, in Central and South America, between blacks in the Caribbean and in America, with blacks in Africa and blacks all over this world. But it must be based on what? A sense of Africanness and a sense of one peopleness. And when you have that, you can, despite these statistics, begin to transform your situation. And if need be, you might be able to even move other people out of their places to make place for yourself. Even a lot of people think that's immoral, but that's the way the world works. What can I tell you? People have not hesitated 1 minute to move us when it suited their needs. And our not moving them when it suits ours is not going to save us from being moved by them. So we have to face up to the fact that we have some dire circumstances. Yes, ma'am.
As you mentioned earlier in your lecture, the population schools now are such that the classes are overcrowded. Mm-hmm. How can we help our young people when the classes are overcrowded and teachers are quite naturally get impatient? If a child is not walking a straight line and holding their hands for 6 hours and keeping quiet, how can we help them with their self-esteem when they're knocked down by the teachers in the classroom?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are a number of things we can do. Of course, the ultimate thing we must go at is try to get the teachers out of the classroom. That's a long-term goal. One of the reasons why I'm writing this book, Developmental Cycle of the Black Child, Awakening the Natural Genius of Black Children, the next book will be Educating the African American Child for the 21st Century. Because I'm trying to lay down a rationale, a theoretical and practical basis for how black children can be educated within the context that you mentioned. I'm also trying to lay down a basis and a rationale that we can take to the schools of education and say, look, we want the curricula of these schools changed to meet the needs of our children based on this information based on our psychology, our knowledge of ourselves. We now want to set the standards for credentials. Since whites are no longer in these schools, we do not see any reason why the standards set for white folk should any longer be operative in these schools, you see. So we have to now examine the credentials, we have to examine the teacher training, and now just as actively as we moved in the 60s against certain injustices, we now have to move intellectually and otherwise in this moment to change teacher training. The book I'm writing proposes what I call a theory of education. Do black children learn according to a different style than whites? And why do they learn that way? If we assume that they do, then what method of teaching is best for that style? Now, we have the information, we have the research information, we have the factual data to be clear on these issues. Now we have to go to the powers that be, and we have to become the powers that be and say, look, we want the schools to be restructured in this way to meet these standards. The other thing is, of course, we have to maintain surveillance. Teachers and people can only get away with that behavior if they are unwatched by a community. And if a community does not represent itself, either formally or informally, in the school situation, such that it can prevent this kind of behavior. This can only occur when parents have abandoned their educational role and are not a part of curriculum training and not a part of the standards by which children are taught and schools are run and principals are selected and teachers are fired or whatever, you see. So when parents abdicate their natural right to surveil what is going on in the school, their natural right to be a part of school governance, their natural right to go to district meetings and other meetings to demand change, then you're going to have that kind of behavior. The other thing that can be done, of course, to a great extent, the education in self-esteem, the education in self-confidence and so forth, is really the responsibility of our culture. That basically has to take place in the home and in the cultural institutions that we have, such as the institution you have here right now, you see, where both adults and youngsters are educated in the culture. This takes place in after-school programs, which can occur in the schools themselves, you see. In other words, after the formal school is over, then let the cultural education, the tutoring, the support take place. Weekend schools. Ultimately, if you've taken over the economic infrastructure of your community, if you have aggressively moved into the American economic system, if we have built the kind of trade relations with Africa and with the African diaspora, we then are in a position to exert real power in America and use that power to redesign schools. But we are also in a position to build private schools and to support the kind of schools out of our own funding that we want as a people, you see. And that's one reason why I'm talking about taking over the infrastructure. See, taking over the infrastructure is not that we just replace the people for the hell of it, but it means that the monies that we gain from this can be used to build a school system, can be used to build recreational centers, cultural centers, other kind of centers that can make up or more than compensate for the problems in the public schools. Yes, ma'am. I'll cut them short here because our time is running out.
For African American students who are getting ready to go to colleges, what is your opinion about African American students who are going to black colleges as opposed to going to integrated colleges?
Of course, I'm a product of a black college, but not only for that reason, I without hesitation recommend the attendance of a black school for a number of reasons. First of all, do not fall victim to the myth that because it's black, it's inferior in its educational qualifications. If you study the history of African American people, you will recognize that our most intellectual people, our leadership, and so forth has come right out of black schools and colleges and universities. And this not only is because of the academic quality of these schools, but also just because of many intangible qualities that you gain. The quality of being amongst your own people, being amongst your own people and seeing them express their intellectuality, seeing an institution run by your own people as such and being a part of that institution, becoming sensitively aware of the needs of your people and what our people face and what our people must do, the kind of spirit that you get when you go there. The idea that you're not being educated solely for your own individual existence, but your education is tightly bound up with the advancement of your people. It's no way that I could have seen in terms of my education and my career being separated from the struggle of black people. It was inconceivable because we came up under that kind of structure. Even when the academic equipment and so forth may not equal pound for pound what you see in white schools. It's often more than made up in terms of the determination and stamina that you learn and develop from going to these schools. And this is true this can be attested to by the fact that when you measure black students coming from black schools going to white graduate schools and compare them with black students who've gone to predominantly white schools going to graduate schools, you'll find that the black students going to predominantly black schools, southern colleges, do on the average better than those who've gone to white schools as such. So you're not going to suffer a handicap by going to a black school. And of course, since all of us can't go, I'm not saying if you can't go, don't go. If you happen to go to a white school, or predominantly white school, you can still maintain your black consciousness and your black sense of self. I went to a university here where there were as many as 3,000 black students in one college there, the Virginia Commonwealth University, which means that that black student body in that white school was larger than many black colleges. So if you then become a part of the African-centered student group, you can maintain your African integrity and survive as an African person, even in the midst of white folk. So the key thing then is to maintain a sense of yourself and a sense of who and what you are, and maintain your African identity no matter where you are, among whom you may be. And if you do that, you'll survive it and you'll do well. Yes, sir.
Since welfare is used to pacify the poor people, can we look upon President Clinton's proposal to take people off of welfare in 2 years as something as a start of a new movement after you take those people off of welfare?
No, you just laugh. That's all you do. It's a joke. You can't take the thing seriously. That's what we call for political consumption. We get that kind of joke all the time. Workfare instead of welfare. I mean, just look at the ludicrousness of it. How are you going to make work for welfare people when people who aren't on welfare can't find any work? You know, we're talking, what did we just get through talking about? The laying off of what? Thousands of people? Hundreds of thousands of people? And Clinton is going to perform a miracle and create work for people on welfare? When people who already own jobs cannot maintain even the jobs they have? Come on. This is a joke. You laugh at stuff like that. You don't even take it seriously. There's nothing new about that. It's one of those games that a president plays because he feels obligated to make the statement in order to get his main program through. You see? And so when he's asking white folk to pay taxes, increase taxes, when he's talking about increased taxes on corporations, when he's telling these people that they're going to have to make sacrifices, what can he ask the poor to do but sacrifice their welfare? You see, to make it appear that everybody is in this thing together. And so it, in a sense, takes the edge off of what he's asking white folk to do to make it appear to them that he is getting on those welfare loafers, you know, in a way that he's asking everybody else. But that's not come true. This idea of getting people off in 2 years is a farce. Plus, plus just a quick aside on this. What if you did get people off on welfare and you really trained them to work? And you trained them, let us say, to be computer operators, right? And now you decided that since they're on welfare and they must work, you can get them to work for $4 an hour. What will happen there? You can replace those who are already on that job working at what? $10 or $15 an hour. Understand? So you have to be very careful with these kind of idiotic statements because they really are just that. The idea of getting people off welfare and you're going to work them. The other thing I must bring to you while we're at this also feeds into the mythology that welfare is a major cost factor in the U.S. budget. And that simply is not true. The people who get the most money out of the U.S. government are people who make $50,000 and above. People who make $100,000 a year get more money from the government than people who make $10,000 and under. Understand what I'm saying? So there's a myth that the people on welfare are the ones that's causing the problem. Not at all. It's groups that you wouldn't even know. And it's that famous middle class that gets a lot of the money. You see, if that middle class, you get that middle class that tries to say it's so self-determining that they make it on their own, tell them to really look at their tax credits. Ask many of them, how many of them will turn down the FHA loans? How many will turn down the loan guarantees by the government and so forth, which supports middle class life? One day we'll talk about the whole bit, but there's a great deal of unfairness, a great deal of deception, a great deal of nonsense that's being laid out about welfare, people on welfare, and all the other stuff. You can only get over this, though, if you really read and come to understand what is actually going on in the world and act in your own political interests. Thank you very much for your attention. It was great being with you.
A key takeaway from Wilson's analysis is his insistence that Black Americans must begin to think and behave as a sovereign nation within a nation. This means developing a self-reliant infrastructure for education, economics, and social development. The current educational system, he asserts, does not prepare Black children to create businesses, generate wealth, or control the economic landscape of their communities. Instead, it teaches dependency and conditions them to work in and enrich businesses and institutions controlled by other racial groups. Wilson further emphasizes that Black children must be educated in a way that prepares them to seize economic power. He envisions an education that includes practical training in entrepreneurship, trade, finance, and international commerce. Black youth must be equipped to build industries that provide employment opportunities for their people and extend economic ties throughout the African diaspora. Anything less, Wilson warns, will keep Black people economically dependent and politically powerless. In closing, Dr. Wilson presents a sobering but empowering challenge. The failure of the current education system is not just academic. It's a matter of national and cultural survival for Black Americans. Real education, in Wilson's view, must cultivate the skills, values, and mindset necessary for Black people to control their own communities and their economic destiny. If they do not, they will continue to enrich other groups at their own expense, ensuring a cycle of poverty and subjugation that future generations may not be able to escape.